Hello everyone, good evening, it is good to see you. 15th June 2020 is a date that is etched in the memory of a nation. It's a day we lost 20 men at the freezing heights of Eastern Ladakh. They fought a deceitful enemy with whatever they had. They died an honorable death, protecting their flag, protecting their country. Galwan was the turning point of the India-China standoff. It showed us that the gloves were off. The mirage that India could deal with China diplomatically was over. India needed to be prepared for war, and we came pretty close to it 2 months after the Galwan clashes. A year after the bloody clashes and 4 months after the disengagement at Pangong So, two big questions remain. Why is China refusing to disengage any further? Has the LAC in Eastern Ladakh been redrawn forever? And what is the long view from Ladakh? I'm putting all those questions to one of India's best military minds, General D.S. Huda. He is joining us in just a bit. We also have an extract of an interview that I did with General M.M. Naravane. We are going to play that once again. But before that, a look back at the Galwan clashes that changed the India-China relationship, perhaps forever. 15th June 2020. The standoff between Indian and Chinese troops in Eastern Ladakh had entered its 40th day. After multiple rounds of military-level talks, a tentative roadmap for disengagement had been worked out. It was to start at PP-14 in Galwan Valley, where the Chinese had come into Indian territory and set up tents and an observation post. The LAC had largely been peaceful since the 1962 war. No soldier had lost his life in combat here in the last 45 years. 15th June 2020 changed that. At 7 p.m. that day, Colonel Santosh Babu, the commanding officer of 16 Bihar, along with 35 of his men, approached PP-14 to verify if the Chinese had vacated the post as agreed upon. They hadn't. This led to a verbal spat that soon escalated into a bloody brawl. As Colonel Babu's team removed Chinese tents, all hell broke loose. The Chinese attacked Colonel Babu and his men using iron rods wrapped with barbed wires, hockey sticks, stones and clubs. Colonel Babu was hit on the head. As he fell, the situation escalated. Reinforcements were rushed in, and soon 300 men were clashing with each other with whatever they could lay hands on. In the dark, many fell into the freezing Galwan River and died of hypothermia. This bloodletting went on for 4 hours. By the time it was over, India had lost 20 soldiers. 10, including 2 majors and 2 captains, were taken hostage by the Chinese. Not a single shot had been fired.
अरे पी के पानी सिंध के खा के सौगन मिट्टी के पी के पानी सिंध के शोला बन के बरसा अरे शोला बन के बरसा 16 बिहार पाप पे शत्रु पे पाप नष्ट किया.
The story of Colonel Santosh Babu and his men became part of Ladakhi folklore. He was awarded the Mahavir Chakra posthumously. His men decorated with the Veer Chakra and Sena Medal for their unrelenting courage in the face of an enemy attack. Days after the clash, Prime Minister Modi made a surprise visit to a forward post in Ladakh and articulated the anger an entire nation was feeling.
मैं गलवान घाटी में शहीद हुए अपने वीर जवानों को भी पुनः श्रद्धांजलि अर्पित करता हूं.
In early July, the disengagement process started in the Galwan Valley, but it didn't progress in other areas. Then came a move that pushed China to the edge. On August 29th, in a surprise midnight move, Indian troops moved to occupy strategic heights on the south bank of Pangong So. It took control of ridgeline positions, dominating the heights and allowing it to keep an eye on Chinese military activity. In mountain warfare, he who occupies the heights dominates the battle. This was a huge pressure point for the Chinese as their crucial Moldo base was in direct line of sight of Indian troops.
31st, when the PLA wanted to come up, right up to the Kailash ranges, that was the time the situation was extremely tense. The Galwan had happened, red lines had been drawn. So we have to be very clear that that's the time when a war was actually averted. We were on the edge. We were absolutely on the brink.
Left with little choice, China agreed to disengage. 10 months into the standoff, these videos of Chinese and Indian tanks disengaging in Pangong So had sparked hope that this was the beginning of the end. It wasn't. 4 months after these videos were taken, there has been no movement to resolve the standoff on other friction points like Gogra, Hot Springs, Demchok and Depsang. China has stalled the corps commander level talks. 60,000 troops continue to be deployed on either side of the LAC in Eastern Ladakh. There is stepped up deployment all across the LAC. The prophecy of the long haul has come true. In New Delhi, I'm Shreya Dhondia. Did India lose its bargaining chip when it agreed to vacate the Kailash ranges? Should India have negotiated disengagement at all friction points simultaneously as was originally planned? That debate is ongoing. Another debate that is ongoing is how many Chinese soldiers were killed in the Galwan clashes. China, a master at lying through its teeth, first denied any deaths, then it faced intense public anger within China at this dishonor of its own soldiers. And then, of course, it finally came out with a figure of 4. India has put that figure at 46 at least. Take a look.
Recently, TASS, the Russian agency, had put out a figure of 45, and I think that could be one of the figures we could look at.
Okay, but it could be more than that as well.
It could be more than that as well.
It is a statement that has set the cat amongst the pigeons. The dragon being pushed to admit that it had suffered fatalities in the bloody Galwan clashes of June 15th. In reports carried by both the People's Daily and Global Times, China for the first time in 8 months has acknowledged that it lost soldiers in the Galwan clashes. They put the figure at 4, a gross underreporting meant to save face. General D.S. Huda, a former Northern Army commander, says by putting out a figure of 4, the Chinese want to tell the world that they lost far less men than India.
After such a long time, to come out with some, underinflated sort of figures, I think, everybody will see it just merely as a propaganda. And I don't think anybody will ascribe any kind of sort of truth to the figures that the Chinese have given out.
This video, released by Global Times along with their report, puts the blame of the Galwan clashes on India and details the roles of the 4 PLA soldiers who had died in the clash that day. The question is, why did the Chinese lie for 8 months?
China has exercised great restraint, reflecting our tolerance and commitment as a responsible power. However, the Indian side has repeatedly exaggerated and hyped the casualties, distorting the truth and misleading international public opinion.
When 8 months ago, this picture of a grave of a soldier called Xiang Grangrong had emerged on the Chinese version of WhatsApp called WeChat, the PLA then had called it fake. Now, this very soldier's name has been given out in the list of dead. With China, the truth always comes out in installments, says Professor Brahmachalani.
In China, they always release information after a cover-up in little bits. They never come clean totally. So what we are seeing is just the first bit. We will see more bits of information coming out from China, but they'll never come clean because full truth and the CCP don't go together.
China is a master at propaganda warfare and will lie and twist facts to protect the strongman image it portrays to the world. But India's firm stand in Eastern Ladakh, its refusal to bow down to bullying, has not just pushed them to acknowledge their dead soldiers, but also vacate territory they had occupied in North Bank. The disengagement in Pangong So is complete, but peace is a long way off. Reporting for CNN News 18, I'm Shreya Dhondial. Lieutenant General D.S. Hooda is a former Northern Army commander. He's joining me on the show today. General Hooda, thank you very much for your time. The first question, with perspective of hindsight, with the videos that have been released of the clashes by China, with all that has been said, is it your sense that the Galwan clashes were pre-planned by China, or was this spontaneous?
So Shreya, thank you for inviting me to your show. The truth is possibly only known to soldiers and commanders on ground who were actually there on 15 June and took part in the incident. But my own sense is that it was probably not pre-planned, happened by accident. And the reason I say this, if you recall, the first Corps Commander level meeting took place prior to the Galwan clash, and in that Corps Commander level meeting, both sides had decided that they would withdraw from the area and separate their troops. And from what we know, it was to verify this that the patrol led by Colonel Babu went, and they did find that the Chinese presence was on our side of the LAC, and this probably led to some kind of scuffle between the two sides that turned quite bloody. You see, there was a great deal of suspicion on both sides. If you recall, the Chinese incursions into the Pangong So North Bank were also accompanied by a great deal of violence, although nobody died. But even there were injuries that took place on both sides. So my own sense is probably it wasn't meant to go the way it did go. And, I think neither side wanted, these horrific kind of casualties to take place.
Okay. General, the occupation of the Kailash Heights has been often called a game changer in this entire conflict. But it was Galwan, wasn't it, that really changed things?
Shreya, I agree with you. Yes, in some ways, Kailash Range, was a game changer from our side. But I think what you are saying, the Galwan incident, I think, has greater impact and importance on what happened, actually. So if you recall, before 15th of June, the Chinese incursions had already taken place. But there was some attempt to sort of underplay the situation in the hope that it could be peacefully resolved. I think the clash at Galwan opened our eyes that this current set of incursions that have taken place are completely different from past incidents. They will not be resolved peacefully. And it was only after this that, the great deal of seriousness about how to tackle the situation, the buildup of troops that took place. In some ways, even the Kailash sort of occupation was a reaction to what had happened and what the Chinese had done. So, yes, I think the turning point, in this whole situation was possibly the incident at Galwan.
And General, my last question to you. What is now the long view from Ladakh? For all practical purposes, has the LAC been redrawn, whether we like it or not?
So in some ways, you could say the LAC redrawn because the Chinese are still in occupation of some areas across the LAC as we understand it. Whether it is permanent or not, permanently redrawn is something that we'll have to look at in the future. My own sense, Shreya, is that the situation is not going to get resolved in a hurry. And I say this, frankly, I find a sort of lack of urgency on both sides to try and resolve the situation. There have been no high-level political or diplomatic level contacts in the last 5-6 months. We've had only 2 Corps Commanders level meetings. Some of this, of course, could be put down rightly to the fact that India was engaged in fighting, the second wave of the pandemic, and so that was priority. But the situation is as it is on the LAC. We are not seeing any sort of move forward on this. So unless I think both sides inject a certain level of urgency in the negotiations and trying to find a solution, I'm afraid we are in for a long haul.
We are in for the long haul, and that is something I think, General Hooda, you have been saying from day one. Thank you very much for this quick chat here on Debrief today. Now, on the ground today, there is tense and uneasy calm, with 60,000 soldiers each on either side of the LAC. There is public acceptance by military leaders in India that China is the bigger threat to India, not Pakistan. There has been an external rebalancing, with India investing much more in its relationship with Quad countries, especially the United States of America. Last month, I had spoken to Army Chief General Naravane and asked him where things with China stand right now. Where are the talks right now? This is what he told me. What's the situation on the ground at the LAC so far? Has the process of disengagement/talks come to a complete standstill?
No, I won't say that the process has come to a standstill. The situation along the LAC post the disengagement of February has been very cordial. Both sides are observing that disengagement in letter and spirit. There has been no transgression of any kind, and the process of talks are continuing. We had a 11th round of talks. Thereafter, there will be a WMCC meeting. So that is an alternate corps commander level talk followed by a WMCC meeting, then another. So these talks will continue. What is important is that we are talking to each other, and what is important to know is that between two phases there will always be a period where that trust has to be built up. So as a result of this disengagement, we have gone back February, March, April, so about 2.5 months with no transgressions happening, with no violation of this disengagement. I think the trust has built up, and because of that build up in the trust, maybe we will be able to make now forward movement in the other areas where issues are still to be resolved. I think this is a continuous process which will take time, but will happen.
So, sir, there are reports that China is falsifying its defenses in depth areas. They are building permanent structures. There are reports of underground tunnels being built as well. How's the Indian Army looking at it, and are we doing the same?
Infrastructure development is a continuous process. After all, when you are deployed, you don't want to be deployed in harsh conditions or with substandard facilities for months to come. So obviously, he is also improving his facilities and his infrastructure, his storage, and so are we. But we are monitoring each of these developments, and let me assure you that we are in no way lacking or no way behind in our infrastructure development.
But the situation, according to your estimation, will it continue to be the way it is, your troop deployments the way they are, through the summer, possibly winter as well? Is the Indian Army going to be maintaining those troop levels?
See, as of now, the troop levels continue to be what they were at the height of the standoff.
That is 90,000 troops, sir?
Not 90, a little less than that. But whatever it is, it's a difference of calculations also sometime.
So how many would you say?
Around say 50, 60,000.
Okay.
Because people keep coming, troops are rotated, so at any point of time it is very difficult to say this is the figure. But this, the troops which are deployed, as I mentioned, the disengagement has happened, but there has been no de-escalation. So that's why the troops strength, the numbers in that whole area of the northern front, and when I say northern front, it is not just the area of Eastern Ladakh, but the whole front, right from Ladakh and down to Arunachal. So the whole front will see this enhanced presence till such time that we keep talking and the de-escalation happen. So we have to be ready to be deployed for the long run also.
In another interview, General Naravane, when asked about stalled talks with China, had reminded the reporter of the 1986 Samdarang-Chu standoff in 1986, which had taken 8 years to resolve, perhaps an indication on why the India-China standoff is here to stay. Will we see many more such incidents? Yes, say most experts, if you don't resolve the border question. That is coming up next. Do stay with us. Welcome back. It's a year to the Galwan clashes, a year that has brought the India-China relationship to a crossroad. At the root of the problem is the border question that has lingered on since 1940. 1956 was when the Chinese made their first intrusion into Indian territory in Barahoti in Uttarakhand, and since then, relations have been downhill. Take a look.
It's a relationship that has seen the grandest of highs. In 2015 in Xi'an, when two of Asia's oldest civilizations came together to forge a new beginning. In 2018 in Wuhan, when a promise was made to sail smoothly over all disputed sites along the Sino-Indian border. In 2019 in Mahabalipuram, when a pledge was taken to celebrate the 70th anniversary of Sino-Indian ties in a befitting manner. But it's also a relationship that has seen the ugliest of lows. 1962 was when our neighbor first shattered the myth of Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai by betraying us in Ladakh. They ended up with 38,000 square kilometers of our land, leaving us with just our bruised pride. Diplomatic ties were restored after 14 years when the Indian ambassador was posted back in 1976. But the bonhomie along the borders was never restored again. In 1967, in Sikkim's Nathula, 80 Indian soldiers were martyred and 400 Chinese troops killed. 8 years later, in Tulungla in Arunachal, an Assam Rifles patrol was ambushed and 4 Indian soldiers were martyred. But Galwan 2020 changed the rules of the game forever. For the first time in 45 years, lives were lost along the McMahon line. This time though, Beijing was made to realize that it had crossed a Lakshman Rekha.
आपकी फायर गोई देखी है और आपकी फ्यूरी भी। साथियों, विस्तारवाद का युग समाप्त हो चुका है।
The skirmish at Galwan, which took the lives of 20 brave Indian soldiers and many more PLA troops, came at the heels of several border provocations from Ladakh to Arunachal Pradesh. We saw this in 2013 in Depsang, in 2014 in Chumar, in 2017 in Doklam, and now in 2020 at the Galwan Valley and at Pangong So. But unlike the past, India has gained the upper hand in Ladakh and China is now singing a different tune. 1 year later, we have disengaged, but we have yet to de-escalate, and de-induction seems to be a pipe dream. 1 year after Galwan, Xi has still not spoken a word so far on the border issue. His handshakes and smiles, as they say, are deceptive. Ritangshu Bhattacharya for CNN News 18.
And that is exactly what we need to remember. What are the big lessons from Galwan? A, India cannot afford to trust China ever again. And B, with China's growing economic and military might, India needs allies. The days of non-alignment are long gone. Thanks for watching.